Admiral Jiho Park stood in the command center of the human flagship New Seoul. The massive ship floated in space near the edge of Council territory. Around him, officers worked quietly at their stations. The bridge felt heavy with an unusual silence. Jiho looked at the message screen one more time. The words were simple and final. He had written them himself 3 days ago. Now it was time to send them. "Sir, all human ships report ready," said Commander Yunha Lim from her station. "All diplomatic staff have been recalled from Council space. Ambassador Minho Kim chose to stay behind as a private citizen, as planned." Jiho nodded. The plan had taken months to prepare. Every human in Council space knew what was coming. Some would stay behind to watch and report. Others would return to human space, but all official contact would end today. "Send the message," Jiho said. The communication officer pressed a button. Across the galaxy, the message reached every Council world, every space station, every government building. It was broadcast on all frequencies that the Council used for official business. "This is Admiral Jiho Park of the Human Defense Fleet," the message began. "After 60 years of partnership, humanity withdraws from all Council proceedings. We resign from galactic affairs effective immediately. Do not attempt to contact us through official channels. This decision is final." The message was short. It gave no reasons. It made no threats. It simply announced that humanity was leaving. In the Great Council chamber on Vorthon Prime, Chancellor Thalen Vex received the message during the morning session. The tall, blue-skinned Vorthon read it aloud to the assembled representatives from 14 different species. At first, there was silence. Then someone began to laugh. "Finally," said Representative Korix of the Nexari Collective. His insect-like features clicked with amusement. "The troublemakers have given up." Other representatives began to smile and nod. The humans had always been difficult. They questioned every decision. They demanded explanations for policies that had worked for thousands of years. They insisted on investigating complaints from lesser species. "Perhaps now we can return to proper governance," Chancellor Thalen Vex announced. "Without human interference, we can restore the natural order." The council session that day was the most pleasant in decades. Without human representatives asking awkward questions, business moved quickly. New mining quotas were approved for the Outer Rim worlds. Trade restrictions were expanded to protect core world industries. Military budgets were increased without debate about humanitarian concerns. On Council Station Omega, Minho Kim sat in a small apartment he had rented in the civilian section. He was no longer Ambassador Kim. Now he was just a private citizen who happened to live near the galactic government. He watched the council sessions on public broadcasts and took careful notes. Minho had served as humanity's chief diplomat for 15 years. He knew every representative personally. He had negotiated hundreds of agreements and prevented dozens of conflicts. Now he watched his former colleagues celebrate his people's departure. "They think they have won," he said to himself. He opened a secure communication device and sent a brief message to Earth. "Phase 1 complete. They are relieved we are gone." Back on Earth, President Woo Jin Lee read the message in his office in Seoul. Around him, his advisors studied reports from across human space. The withdrawal had gone smoothly. Every human ship, station, and facility in Council territory had been quietly evacuated or abandoned. "What about our other operations?" asked Defense Secretary Kyung-soo. "All personnel have been recalled," replied Intelligence Director Sunmi Park. "Trade missions, cultural exchanges, military advisors, technical consultants. Everyone is back in human space or has gone deep undercover." President Lee nodded. "And our friends in the independent systems?" "They know what to do," Sunmi said. "We have given them everything they need. Weapons, training, communication systems, strategic plans. They can operate without direct support for several years." The withdrawal had taken 2 years to plan. It was not just about pulling out diplomats and soldiers. Humans had been involved in every aspect of Council life. They served as mediators in trade disputes. They provided technical expertise for infrastructure projects. They trained security forces and advised governments. They had quietly become essential to how the galaxy worked. Now all of that was ending. On the mining world of Kepler 7, Foreman Donghyuk Cho received orders to shut down the human-managed operations. The mines there produced rare metals used in Council starship construction. Human engineers had increased production by 40% over the past decade. "Sir, what do we tell the Vorthon supervisors?" asked his assistant. "Tell them nothing," Dong-Yuk replied. "Pack up our equipment. Leave the standard mining gear for the locals. Delete all our technical files." Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Human agricultural advisors left their experimental farms. Human teachers closed their schools for alien children. Human doctors transferred their patients to local medics and destroyed their research notes. The withdrawal was thorough and professional. Humans did not sabotage anything. They did not steal council property. They simply took their knowledge and skills and went home. At first, the council barely noticed. The galaxy was huge, and humans were just one species among many. But within days, small problems began to appear. On Nexari Industrial Station, the two atmospheric processors began having issues. The human technicians who maintained them were gone. The Nexari engineers tried to fix the problems using standard procedures, but the systems were more complex than they expected. "These modifications are not in the technical manuals," reported Chief Engineer Zirak. "The humans must have upgraded the systems without telling us." In the Vorthon Military Academy, instructors struggled to teach advanced tactical courses. The lesson plans had been developed by human advisors over many years. Without the humans to explain the concepts, the courses made little sense. "Sir, the cadets are asking questions we cannot answer," reported Academy Commandant Thex. "The strategic theories reference human military history that we do not understand." Trade disputes that had been dormant for months suddenly flared up again. The Human Mediation Service had been quietly preventing conflicts by finding creative solutions that satisfied all parties. Without those mediators, old arguments returned with renewed intensity. Chancellor Thalen Vex dismissed these early reports. "Minor inconveniences," he told his staff. "We managed the galaxy for millennia before humans arrived. We will adapt quickly." But privately, he was beginning to wonder. The humans had been involved in so many projects. They had offered help with so many problems. Had the council become too dependent on their assistance? He ordered a review of all human activities in council space over the past 60 years. The report would take months to complete, but Thalen Vex was confident it would show that human contributions were minimal and easily replaced. The first month after humanity's withdrawal was declared a success by council leadership. Trade continued normally. The military maintained order. Government functions proceeded smoothly. But observers who looked more carefully began to notice subtle changes. Communication delays between distant systems grew longer as human maintained. Relay stations went offline. Economic efficiency dropped in sectors where human advisors had optimized production. Crime rates increased in regions where human security consultants had trained local police. Minho Kim documented everything from his apartment on Council Station Omega. Each night he compiled reports from human observers throughout Council space. The pattern was clear to anyone who knew what to look for. "They do not realize what they have lost yet," he wrote in his daily message to Earth. But the cracks are beginning to show. The galaxy continued to spin. Ships traveled between stars. Citizens went about their daily lives. The council governed as it always had, but something fundamental had changed. The invisible network of expertise and assistance that had held galactic civilization together was gone. And slowly, inevitably, that civilization began to come apart at the edges. The council had gotten what they wanted. The troublesome humans were gone. The galaxy was theirs to rule without interference. They would soon learn that some gifts are only recognized after they are taken away. 6 months had passed since humanity's withdrawal from galactic affairs. The initial celebrations in council space had faded into routine. Most citizens barely remembered that humans had ever been involved in their daily lives. But in government offices and military headquarters across the galaxy, a different story was emerging. Commander Bora of the Keth Liberation Front sat in her hidden base on the asteroid Gamma 7. The base was carved deep into the rock, invisible to council sensors. Around her, 20 of her most trusted lieutenants waited for orders. The holographic display showed council patrol routes throughout the Keth home system. "The supply convoy arrives in 6 hours," Bora said. It will be carrying medical supplies to the prison colonies on Keth 4. We have 2 ships in position to intercept. Lieutenant Nehru raised his hand. Commander, how do we coordinate the attack? The convoy has council escorts. Bora stared at the display. For 3 years, human advisors had helped plan every Liberation Front operation. They had taught the Keth how to analyze enemy movements, how to time attacks, how to avoid council patrols. The humans had shared tactical knowledge that turned a desperate rebellion into an effective resistance movement. Now those advisors were gone. We attack from 2 directions, Bora said, trying to remember human lessons about space combat. Split their attention. But what about their fighter escort? Asked another lieutenant. The humans always said to neutralize fighters first. We will target the fighters, Bora replied, but she sounded uncertain. The attack 6 hours later was a disaster. The Liberation Front ships attacked the convoy as planned, but their timing was wrong. The council escorts were ready for them. Without proper coordination, the 2 Keth ships flew into each other's firing solutions. One ship was destroyed by friendly fire. The other was captured. Bora escaped, but barely. Back at the asteroid base, she faced her surviving officers. Their faces showed doubt and fear. The humans made it look easy, she admitted. We thought we understood their teachings, but we only learned the surface. Similar failures were happening across the galaxy. On dozens of worlds, resistance movements that had thrived with human support suddenly found themselves struggling against enemies they had been defeating for years. In Council space, different problems were emerging. The Zephyrian commercial station had been the busiest trade hub in the outer spiral for 20 years. Ships from hundreds of worlds came there to buy and sell goods. The station's success was built on efficient cargo handling, fair pricing, and quick dispute resolution. Station manager Kellex walked through the main docking bay and frowned. Half the cargo berths were empty. Ships that used to make regular stops had stopped coming. The ones that did arrive often left without completing their business. What is the problem? Kellex asked Portmaster Jorak. Trade disputes, sir, Jorak replied. The Andorian merchants refuse to trade with the Centauran dealers. Both sides claim the other is cheating. Yesterday, the Rigelian cargo captain accused the Terrellian fuel suppliers of fraud. Send both sides to mediation, Kellex ordered. Sir, we do not have mediators anymore. The Human Diplomatic Service used to handle all commercial disputes. They had representatives on every major trading station. Kellex had forgotten about the human mediators. They had been so quiet and efficient that most people barely noticed them. When conflicts arose, the humans would meet with both sides, listen to their complaints, and somehow find solutions that made everyone happy enough to continue trading. Without those mediators, every disagreement became a crisis. Trust between trading partners broke down. Business relationships that had lasted decades ended over minor disputes. Trade volume dropped by 20% in the first month. Contact the Council. Commercial Authority, Kellex ordered. Request official mediators. The response came back 3 days later. The Council could provide mediators, but they were expensive and had a 6-month waiting list. Most traders could not afford to wait 6 months to resolve disputes. On the military, training world of Nexus Prime, General Thurex reviewed the latest exercise reports. The results were disappointing. Cadet performance had dropped significantly over the past 6 months. These tactical scores are unacceptable, Thurex said to his staff. How do we explain this decline? Colonel Varric consulted his files. Sir, the problem started after we lost the human instructors. They had been teaching our advanced strategy courses for 12 years. We still have the lesson plans they created, Thurex pointed out. Yes, sir, but the lesson plans reference concepts we do not fully understand. The humans base their teachings on thousands of years of military history from their homeworld. Without them to explain the context, many strategies make no sense to our cadets. Thurex pulled up a sample lesson on his screen. The topic was asymmetric warfare in multi-species conflicts. The lesson plan mentioned something called the Marathon Strategy and Nelson's Touch and Blitzkrieg Adaptation. These were all human historical references that meant nothing to Nexari instructors. Can we not research these concepts? Thurex asked. We tried, sir. Human historical databases are not available to us. The information is considered classified by their government. The general realized that decades of military education had been built on human knowledge that the Council did not actually possess. Without access to human military thinking, their officer training programs were incomplete. Meanwhile, on Earth, President Wu Jin-Lee reviewed weekly reports from across human space. The withdrawal from Council territory was allowing humanity to focus on internal development. New colonies were being established. Trade with independent systems was expanding. Human technology was advancing rapidly without the need to share innovations with the Council. "How are our former allies managing?" the President asked Intelligence Director Sun-Mi Park. "Better than the Council, but not well," Sun-Mi replied. "The independent systems we trained are maintaining their defense capabilities, but they miss our coordination support. Pirates are becoming bolder in areas where we used to patrol." "And the Council's economy?" "Declining slowly but steadily. Trade efficiency is down across all sectors. Their manufacturing output has dropped 15%. Several member worlds are reporting supply chain problems." The President nodded. "What about their military capabilities?" Defense Secretary Kyung-soo answered that question. "Council forces have lost 3 encounters with pirates in the past month. They are reverting to old tactical doctrines that we helped them move beyond years ago. Their response times are slower, their coordination is poor, and their intelligence gathering has become unreliable. These were not accidents. For 60 years, human advisors had quietly improved every aspect of Council operations. They had shared tactical innovations that made Council forces more effective. They had introduced management techniques that made governments more efficient. They had created communication protocols that allowed different species to work together smoothly. All of that institutional knowledge had walked away with the humans." On Council Station Omega, Min-ho Kim continued his careful observations. He watched Council representatives struggle with problems that had been easily solved when human diplomats were present. Trade negotiations that used to take days now dragged on for weeks. Military planning sessions that had been quick and decisive now produced confused and contradictory orders. The most telling moment came during a Council debate about mining rights in the Tau Ceti system. 2 member species claimed the same asteroid field. Both sides presented legal arguments based on ancient treaties and territorial claims. Chancellor Thalen Vex listened to hours of testimony from both sides. Finally, he called for a vote. The Council split evenly, 7 species supporting each claimant. "This matter is unresolved," the Chancellor declared. "We will revisit it next month." Min-ho remembered similar disputes from his years as human ambassador. The standard human approach was to find a compromise that addressed both sides' real concerns. Often, this meant discovering what each side actually needed versus what they said they wanted. A human mediator might suggest joint mining operations, shared profits, or territorial swaps that gave each side something valuable. But the Council had no tradition of creative problem-solving. Their approach was to apply existing laws to new situations. When the laws were unclear or contradictory, they simply postponed decisions and hoped the problems would resolve themselves. They would not. Instead, the unresolved disputes would multiply and fester. The 2 species claiming Tau Ceti would likely end up fighting over it, forcing the Council to intervene militarily. That would be expensive and destructive, and it would leave both sides bitter and resentful. A human diplomat could have prevented all of that with a few days of careful negotiation. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson about the difference between governing and leading. The Council had always focused on maintaining control through rules and military force. Humans had focused on making the system work better for everyone involved. Without human influence, galactic civilization was beginning to calcify. Old problems resurfaced. Efficiency declined, trust between different species eroded, and in the shadows, forces that had been kept in check by human vigilance began to stir. Pirates grew bolder. Criminal syndicates expanded their operations. 2 years had passed since humanity went silent. The galaxy looked very different now. On the research station above New Geneva, Dr. Daeun Cho watched through the observation deck as Vorthon warships limped back from another failed mission. The once mighty vessels showed burn marks and structural damage. Several ships were missing from the fleet that had departed just 3 weeks earlier. "Another disaster," her colleague Dr. Taewon Ryu commented, joining her at the window. "That is the 4th Council fleet to return in poor condition this month," Daeun nodded, making notes on her tablet. As a human xenosociologist, she had spent her career studying alien civilizations. Now she was documenting the slow collapse of the largest government in galactic history. What was their mission this time? She asked. Anti-piracy operations in the Vega sector, Taiwan replied. The same route they have been trying to secure for 6 months. According to the reports, they encountered the Iron Brotherhood again. The Iron Brotherhood was a pirate confederation that had been a minor annoyance during the years of human involvement in council affairs. Human intelligence services had tracked their movements and disrupted their operations regularly. Council, military forces with human tactical advice, had kept them contained to a few remote systems. Now the Brotherhood controlled 12 systems and was expanding rapidly. How many ships did they lose? Dayun asked. 3 destroyers and a cruiser. The pirates are using tactics the Council cannot counter. Dayun almost smiled. She recognized those tactics from the classified reports she had access to. The Iron Brotherhood was using strategies that human military advisors had taught to legitimate defense forces across the galaxy. Someone among the pirates had received proper training in asymmetric warfare, fleet coordination, and intelligence operations. The irony was perfect. The Council was being defeated by their own weapons, improved by human knowledge, and turned against them by enemies who had learned from human teachers. On Earth, President Wu Jin-Li received his monthly briefing from the Defense Council. The news from Council space grew worse each report. 17 member species have declared independence or autonomy in the past year, reported Foreign Minister Jiwan Han. The Zephyrian Consortium was the largest, but others are following their example. What triggered the Zephyrian decision? The president asked. Intelligence Director Sun-Mi Park answered. Trade disputes with the core worlds. The Zephyrians wanted to negotiate new commercial agreements, but council mediators could not find acceptable solutions. The disputes escalated into trade wars, then actual fighting. The Zephyrians decided they would be better off governing themselves. Could this have been prevented? Easily, Sun-Mi said. The dispute was over shipping fees and customs regulations. Human commercial mediators resolved similar conflicts regularly. The underlying issues were minor. President Lee studied the galactic map on his wall. Red zones marked areas of conflict or instability. Yellow zones showed regions with significant problems. Green zones indicated stable, peaceful systems. 2 years ago, most of the map had been green. Now, red and yellow zones covered nearly half of council space. What about the military situation? He asked Defense Secretary Kyung-soo. Council forces are losing effectiveness rapidly, Kyung reported. Their win rate against organized opponents has dropped from 90% to less than 40%. They have lost control of major trade routes. Piracy is at levels not seen in 3 centuries. And their economy? Economic advisor Minju Song provided those numbers. Council GDP has contracted by 38%. Unemployment is rising on most member worlds. Tax revenues have dropped so much that several planetary governments are requesting emergency aid from the central authority. The collapse was accelerating. What had started as minor inefficiencies was becoming a civilization-wide crisis. In his apartment on Council Station Omega, Min-ho Kim compiled his daily report for Earth. The former ambassador had become humanity's primary observer of council politics. His reports painted a picture of an institution in free fall. Today's council session had been particularly revealing. Chancellor Thalen Vex had addressed the assembly about the growing crisis in the Outer Rim territories. The situation is temporary, the chancellor had declared. These rebellions are coordinated by outside agitators. Once we identify and eliminate the source, order will be restored. Representative Korix of the Nexari had asked the obvious question. What outside agitators? Our intelligence services have found no evidence of foreign involvement. The chancellor had no good answer. The truth was that the rebellions were spontaneous reactions to council policies that no longer worked. Without human advisors to help, member species adapt to changing conditions. Old grievances had resurged and new problems had gone unsolved. We need new strategies, Representative Taima of the Altarian Republic had suggested. The old methods are not working. The old methods worked for millennia, Chancellor Thalen Vex had replied. We simply need to apply them more vigorously. Minho shook his head as he typed his report. The council leadership still did not understand the nature of their problem. They thought they were facing a military challenge that could be solved with more ships and stronger laws. They could not see that their entire approach to governance had become obsolete. The galaxy had changed during the decades of human involvement. Species that had once accepted council authority without question now expected to be consulted about policies that affected them. Worlds that had been content with basic services now demanded efficient administration and economic opportunity. Human, diplomatic and administrative innovations had raised expectations across the galaxy, but when the humans left, the Council had reverted to older, simpler methods of governance. The result was a system that could no longer satisfy the needs of its citizens. On the independent world of Kepler 9, President Seonho Park addressed his planetary council. Kepler 9 had declared independence from the Council 6 months earlier, following the example of the Zephyrian Consortium. "The transition is proceeding well," President Park reported. "Our economy is growing for the first time in 5 years. Crime rates are down. Citizen satisfaction surveys show significant improvement. The success was not accidental. Kepler 9 had been one of the worlds where human advisors had been most active. When humanity withdrew from council space, many of their local innovations and improvements had remained behind. The planetary government had inherited efficient administrative systems, trained security forces, and productive economic policies. "What about our defense capabilities?" asked Defense Minister Yun-Ho Kim. "Our security forces are well trained and equipped," the president replied. "The council has made no move to force us back into their authority. Frankly, they appear to have more pressing concerns." The irony was that Kepler 9's success was making the council's problems worse. Other worlds saw that independence could be beneficial. If a minor planet like Kepler 9 could govern itself effectively, why did they need the council's expensive and inefficient administration? The answer, which the council leadership still did not recognize, was that successful independent worlds had retained the benefits of human involvement while escaping the growing dysfunction of council governance. In the Vega sector, Admiral Hyoxio commanded the Iron Brotherhood's newest fleet. The former human military advisor had been working with rebel groups and independent forces when humanity withdrew from galactic affairs. Rather than return to human space, he had chosen to continue his mission in a different form. "Target the command ship first," he instructed his mixed crew of humans, aliens, and former council military personnel. "Disrupt their coordination, then hit the escorts while they are confused." The tactic worked perfectly. Council forces still used formation fighting that had been standard for centuries. They relied on centralized command structures and predictable movement patterns. Against enemies who understood their weaknesses, they were helpless. Admiral Seo felt no guilt about his actions. The Iron Brotherhood under his leadership had become a force for liberation rather than simple piracy. They targeted council supply convoys heading to occupied worlds. They disrupted military operations against rebellious systems. They provided protection for trade ships from independent planets. The galaxy's criminals and freedom fighters were using human knowledge to level the playing field against council authority, and they were winning. On the council's capital world, Chancellor Thalen Vex finally received the intelligence report he had ordered 2 years earlier. The document was 3,000 pages long. It detailed every aspect of human involvement in council affairs over 6 decades. The Chancellor read it alone in his private office. With each page, his expression grew more troubled. The scope of human influence had been far greater than anyone had realized. Humans had not just participated in council activities. They had quietly redesigned those activities to make them work better. Every successful trade negotiation, every effective military operation, every peaceful resolution of political disputes had human fingerprints on it. The report's conclusion was devastating. Council governance during the human era was fundamentally dependent on human expertise. Without access to human knowledge and methods, the Council is reverting to pre-human levels of effectiveness. 3 years had passed since humanity's withdrawal, and the galaxy was unrecognizable. What had once been the proud Galactic Council now resembled a collection of squabbling city-states held together by tradition and fear. On the resort moon of Jeju, former Director of Human Galactic Relations, Tae-hyun Yu sat in his garden overlooking the East Sea. The morning was peaceful, but his communication device buzzed with urgent messages from news organizations across the galaxy. After 3 years of silence, Tae-hyun had agreed to his first interview since humanity's departure. The interviewer from independent Galactic News Network appeared as a hologram in his living room. She was a young Centauran journalist named Valix, one of the few reporters still trying to cover galactic affairs objectively. "Director Yu, thank you for agreeing to speak with us," Valix began. "The galaxy has changed dramatically since humanity left council space. What is your perspective on these developments?" Tae-hyun had prepared for this moment. His words would be broadcast across hundreds of worlds. They might be the first honest explanation many citizens had heard about their civilization's collapse. "For 60 years, he said calmly, humanity tried to help the council succeed. We did not seek to control or dominate. We wanted to contribute to galactic prosperity and peace. But council leaders often accused humans of interference and manipulation," Velix pointed out. "They were correct about one thing," Tae-hyun admitted. "We did think we knew better solutions to many problems, and we were right." He paused, letting that statement settle. "Every time council bureaucracy created a crisis, we provided fixes. When their military tactics failed, we developed better strategies. When member species grew unhappy, we found compromises. We were not trying to rule the galaxy. We were trying to help it work." The interview continued for 2 hours. Tae-hyun revealed details that shocked even experienced political observers. He explained how human psychologists had designed the cultural exchange programs that prevented ethnic conflicts between species. He described how human economists had created the trade systems that kept council worlds prosperous. He outlined the quantum communication networks that human engineers had built to coordinate the vast council territory. Most damaging of all, he revealed the scope of human military advice to council forces. "We taught them how to fight us," Tae-hyun said with bitter irony. "Council officers attended human military academies. We shared our strategic thinking, our tactical innovations, our intelligence methods. We helped them become effective against pirates and rebels, not realizing that someday they might use those same methods against human targets." "Why did humanity provide so much assistance?" Velix asked. "Because we believed in the Council's mission," Tae-hyun replied. "A peaceful, prosperous galaxy benefits everyone, including humanity. We thought that by making the Council more effective, we were building a better future for all species." "And now?" Tae-hyun looked directly at the camera. "Now they are reaping the consequences of rejecting that help. We tried to warn them that our withdrawal would cause problems, but they would not listen. They accused us of making threats when we were simply explaining realities." The interview's most explosive moment came when Tae-hyun revealed humanity's predictions about the post-withdrawal galaxy. "We ran computer simulations," he said. "Complete governmental collapse within 5 to 7 years. Economic devastation. Return to pre-council warring between species. Mass starvation on worlds dependent on council aid. Piracy and slavery returning to levels not seen in centuries. We showed these projections to council leadership 3 years ago." What was their response? "They accused us of propaganda and fear-mongering. They said we were trying to make ourselves indispensable. They were wrong. We were already indispensable. They just did not realize it." The interview ended with Tae-hyun's assessment of current conditions. "The council has 18 months, perhaps 2 years, before complete collapse," he stated matter-of-factly. "After that, the galaxy will fragment into competing regions. Some areas will maintain civilization. Others will descend into chaos. Millions of beings will die unnecessarily." The broadcast sent shockwaves through council space. For the first time, citizens understood the scope of humanity's former involvement in their daily lives. They realized that their current troubles were not temporary setbacks, but symptoms of fundamental system failure. On Earth, former Secretary of Xenological Affairs Ji-young Choi watched the interview from her office in Geneva. She had worked with Tae-hyun for 15 years, managing humanity's diplomatic relationships across the galaxy. "He was more blunt than I expected," she said to her assistant. "Was he wrong about anything?" the assistant asked. "No," Ji-young replied, sadly. "If anything, he was too optimistic. The collapse is happening faster than our models predicted." She pulled up the latest intelligence reports on her screen. The numbers were staggering. Economic production in council space had dropped by half. Government revenues were down 70%. Military effectiveness had declined so much that local defense forces on individual planets were often more capable than council fleets. "What about civilian casualties?" the assistant asked. 7 million confirmed deaths from preventable conflicts in the past year, Ji-young read. 12 million refugees from failed states. Food shortages on 86 worlds that used to be self-sufficient. These were not statistics to humanity's leadership. Each number represented beings who had died because the galaxy's governmental system no longer functioned. Many of those deaths could have been prevented with competent administration and timely humanitarian aid. On Council Station Omega, Minho Kim watched the aftermath of Tae-hyun's interview. Emergency council sessions were called. Representatives demanded explanations from their leadership. Several species began discussing withdrawal from the council. Chancellor Thalen Vex appeared before the council in an emergency session. The proud Vorthon leader looked older and more worn than Minho remembered. These human claims are exaggerated, the chancellor declared. Yes, we face challenges, but the council has survived worse crises. We will adapt and overcome. Representative Jorak of the Denebane Federation stood to respond. Chancellor, with respect, we are not overcoming anything. My homeworld's economy has shrunk by 60%. Our people are leaving for independent systems. Our infrastructure is failing because we cannot maintain systems that humans designed. Then we will build new systems, the chancellor replied. With what resources? Representative Taima of the Altarian Republic interjected. Our tax base is disappearing. Our military cannot maintain order. Our trade networks are collapsing. The debate continued for hours, but it reached no conclusions. The council had no plan for recovering from their current crisis. They had no alternative source of expertise to replace what they had lost when humanity departed. Minho sent his daily report to Earth with growing concern. The council was entering its final phase of collapse. Soon, individual member species would begin making separate peace deals with rebel groups and independent systems. The central authority would become irrelevant. 3 days later, the first major crack appeared. The Centauran Republic, one of the Council's founding members, announced that it was opening diplomatic relations with several independent worlds. They would begin negotiating bilateral trade agreements that bypassed Council oversight. This is not withdrawal from the Council, Centauran Prime Minister Kolex explained. This is simple pragmatism. We must protect our citizens' welfare. Other species quickly followed suit. Within 2 weeks, 8 of the Council's 14 member species had begun independent diplomatic initiatives. Chancellor Thalen Vex realized that his government was losing control, but he could not admit it publicly. Instead, he made a decision that would define his legacy. The Council's first official communication to Earth in 3 years was sent on a heavily encrypted channel directly to President Wu Jin-Lee. The message was brief. The Galactic Council requests immediate humanitarian consultation with human leadership regarding current regional instabilities. We are prepared to discuss terms for renewed cooperation. It was not quite an admission of defeat, but it was close. The word consultation was diplomatic language for help. The phrase renewed cooperation meant they wanted humans to fix their problems. President Lee shared the message with his cabinet during their weekly security briefing. They are not asking us to return as junior partners, Defense Secretary Kyung-soo observed. They want us to save them. What do we tell them? Asked Foreign Minister Ji-won Han. President Lee considered the question carefully. Humanity had the Yike, knowledge and skills to stabilize the galactic situation. They could probably prevent the complete collapse that seemed inevitable, but the cost would be enormous, and there was no guarantee that the Council would not repeat their mistakes once. The crisis passed. We tell them we will consider their request, the President decided. But we do not rush to their rescue. They need to understand the full consequences of their choices. How long do we wait? Intelligence Director Sunmi Park asked. Until they are ready to accept that competence matters more than pride, President Lee replied. Until they acknowledge that good governance requires wisdom, not just authority. And if they never reach that understanding? 4 years had passed since humanity went silent. The Galactic Council's desperate plea for help had reached Earth 3 months ago. President Wu Jin-Lee stood before the Global Assembly in Seoul, ready to announce humanity's decision. The Great chamber was filled with representatives from every nation and major colony. The decision they made today would shape the galaxy's future for generations to come. Fellow humans, President Lee began, we face a choice that our species has never confronted before. We have the power to save a dying civilization. The question is whether we should and at what cost. The debate had raged for months in government chambers, academic institutions, and public forums across human space. Some argued for immediate intervention to prevent further suffering. Others insisted that the Council must face the full consequences of their arrogance. The situation in Council space continues to deteriorate, the President continued. Economic collapse is now complete in 7 sectors. 3 major trade routes are controlled by pirates. 14 worlds have requested emergency food aid. The death toll from preventable conflicts has reached 15 million beings. Behind him, a holographic display showed the latest intelligence reports. The once mighty Galactic Council controlled barely half the territory they had governed 4 years earlier. Independent systems, rebel confederations, and pirate kingdoms had carved up the rest. But we must also consider what we learned from our previous involvement with the Council, President Lee said. For 60 years, we provided assistance that made their system work. We prevented crises, solved problems, and maintained stability. Yet they came to see our help as interference and our expertise as manipulation. The President paused, looking around the chamber at the faces of humanity's elected representatives. When we withdrew, they celebrated. They believed they were finally free from human control. They discovered too late that we were never controlling them. We were enabling them. Foreign Minister Jiwon Han stood to address the Assembly. The Council's latest message was more specific about what they want from us. They request immediate deployment of humanitarian aid coordinators, economic advisors, and military consultants. They offer to restore humanity's council membership with full voting rights. What they offer is not enough, replied Defense Secretary Kyung-soo. They want us to return as we were before, junior partners who provide expertise while they maintain authority. That arrangement failed once. It will fail again. Intelligence Director Sunmi Park presented the strategic analysis. Our assessment is that the Council cannot be saved in its current form. The system is too damaged, the trust between member species too broken. Even with our help, reconstruction would take decades and might not succeed. Then what do we propose? Asked economic advisor Minju Song. President Lee answered that question himself. We propose something new. Not a return to the old system, but the creation of a better one. He activated a new display showing humanity's terms for engagement. The conditions were comprehensive and non-negotiable. First, the President announced, humanity will not rejoin the Council as a member species. We will function as an independent mediating authority with the right to intervene in conflicts, investigate corruption, and protect threatened populations. Murmurs rippled through the Assembly. This was a dramatic departure from traditional diplomacy. Humanity was claiming the right to act as galactic peacekeepers without asking permission from existing authorities. Second, the President continued, any Council world that requests human assistance must accept human oversight of the solution implementation. We will not provide advice that is ignored or expertise that is misused. Third, the Council must acknowledge responsibility for the current crisis and commit to fundamental governmental reforms. We will not help them rebuild the same system that caused this disaster. Fourth, human citizens and organizations will have the right to operate freely throughout Council space. We will not be restricted by bureaucratic barriers or discriminatory regulations. The terms were unprecedented in galactic diplomacy. Humanity was essentially demanding the right to supervise galactic civilization while remaining outside its formal power structures. These conditions will be difficult for the Council to accept, Foreign Minister Ji-won observed. Yes, President, Lee agreed. But they are necessary to prevent future collapses. The galaxy has learned what happens when competence is subordinated to pride. We will not allow that mistake to be repeated. The Assembly voted overwhelmingly to approve the President's proposal. The message was transmitted to Council space within hours. On Council Station Omega, Minho Kim received humanity's response and prepared to deliver it to the Council leadership. The former ambassador had watched the institution crumble for 4 years. Now he would witness either its transformation or its final dissolution. Chancellor Thalan Vex received the message in his private office. He read it 3 times before calling an emergency meeting of the remaining council leadership. "These terms are unacceptable," declared Representative Korix when the conditions were announced. "They are asking us to surrender our sovereignty." "What? Sovereignty?" replied Representative Taima. "Half our member species have left. Our military is ineffective. Our economy is in ruins. What exactly are we protecting?" The debate was fierce, but brief. The council faced a simple choice: accept humanity's conditions or watch galactic civilization complete its collapse into chaos. Chancellor Thalan Vex cast the deciding vote. "We accept," he announced. "May history judge us kindly for choosing. Survival over pride." The response reached Earth the next day. President Lee addressed the nation from his office. "The council has accepted our terms," he announced. "Effective immediately, humanity will begin operations to stabilize galactic affairs. This will not be a return to our previous role. We will be the guardians of galactic civilization, not its servants." The transformation began within days. Admiral Jiho Park led the first human fleet back into council space in 4 years. But these were not the same ships that had withdrawn in defeat. Human technology had advanced significantly during the years of isolation. The new vessels incorporated innovations that made them superior to any other fleet in the galaxy. The fleet's first mission was to secure the major trade routes that pirates had claimed. The Iron Brotherhood, under Admiral Hayok Seo's leadership, had grown bold during the Council's weakness. They controlled 12 systems and regularly attacked civilian shipping. Admiral Park sent a simple message to the pirate fleets: "Return to your home ports immediately or be destroyed." The Brotherhood tried to fight. Their tactics were based on human teachings from decades earlier, but Admiral Park's forces used strategies that had been developed during humanity's 4 years of isolation. The Pirate Confederation was defeated in less than a week, but Park offered mercy to defeated enemies. "Admiral CO," he broadcast, "you are a human citizen who chose to remain behind when we withdrew. Your knowledge has been used well, but for the wrong cause. Join us in building something better." Hyokseo accepted the offer. His forces became the foundation of a new galactic peacekeeping fleet, commanded by humans but crewed by beings from dozens of species. On the trade station of New Geneva, Daeun Cho watched as human administrators began coordinating humanitarian aid efforts. Food shipments reached starving worlds within days. Medical supplies arrived at plague-stricken colonies. Refugee camps were established and managed with efficiency that the galaxy had not seen in years. "They are not ruling us," observed her colleague Taiwan Ryu. "They are managing us." It was an important distinction. Human authority was based on competence, not force. Worlds that cooperated with human oversight prospered quickly. Those that resisted found themselves isolated and struggling. Within 6 months, the transformation was remarkable. Trade resumed along secure routes. Piracy dropped to its lowest levels in decades. Diplomatic disputes were resolved through human mediation that satisfied all parties. The new system was not perfect, but it worked, and it worked because humanity had learned from their previous mistakes. On Council Station Omega, Minho Kim accepted appointment as humanity's first galactic coordinator. His office became the center of a new kind of government, one that governed through service rather than authority. His first official log entry summarized the situation with characteristic honesty. "The galaxy begged us to save them from the consequences of rejecting our help," he wrote. "They feared we would dominate them if we stayed. In the end, their pride forced us to do exactly what they feared most. But there is a difference now. When we were council members, we helped because we believed in cooperation. Now we help because we understand that some species are not meant to be ruled, they are meant to rule wisely. The galaxy has learned that competence is humanity's greatest weapon. Not our ships, not our technology, not our military skill. Our ability to make things work better." He paused in his writing to look out at the stars beyond the station. Across those vast distances, human peacekeepers maintained order. Human diplomats prevented conflicts, and human administrators coordinated the complex systems that kept billions of beings fed, housed, and safe. "Humanity's burden is no longer to serve galactic civilization," he concluded. It is to ensure that civilization serves everyone,